Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We are here yet again for a chatty weekly reading catch-up. So this is going to be a mountainous pile of books to run through because I did have the week off work and spent most of it reading. Things did not all go to plan, but I did indeed read a lot. So let's dive right into the books that I finished for this week. So first on ebook, I have The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme, Weijun, Wang. And this is a collection of essays. It was not on my nonfiction November TBR. However, this is on one of my other yearly TBRs, and I had just borrowed it from the library thinking, oh, well, I'll get to it, maybe. That's how I push myself to finally get to that thing that's been lingering. I just borrow it, and then it forces me to get to it before it goes due. And so I did do that. So I raced through this before it ran out of time on Libby, and it was great. I really enjoyed this collection of essays, and as it says in the title, it is about this author's diagnosis of schizophrenia. So I have to say there's kind of one big problem with this, and that is that the first essay is the only one that's really not very accessible. I really enjoyed clinical psychology in university, and for me, it was still kind of dry and definitely leans into feeling like you're reading a clinical psychology textbook. So if you are struggling with that and getting into it with that first essay, I would say jump ahead because the rest of the essays in here are much more anecdotal about her life. That first essay is just talking through literally the DSM definitions of different mental illness and specifically schizophrenia. And so that's very dry reading. So I found it fascinating, but very dry. So once she gets further into this and she's giving personal anecdotes, I got a lot more engaged with it. She talks us through things like her concerns about if she were to have a child, its risk for having a mental illness diagnosis because they're hereditary very often. Her work at a camp for children with severe mental illness, and then she takes that into an interesting path because she starts talking through how much more influential outside influences are on children with mental illness like herself. And she talks through literary influences, The Never-Ending Story, and her escapism that was fully delusional, it sounds like. And then she ties that into modern culture with the internet and how children are even more influenced by urban legends and internet culture, talking about the Slender Man urban legend. And so I think that was a really interesting way to carry through several different essays. So that was, I think, 4 separate essays made kind of an arc talking about that. And then she tied that last topic into her own experiences with pop culture over several more essays, where she talks through the effects of books and movies on her through different periods of her mental illness and different phases of what she was experiencing. She also discussed the fact that not only was she being kind of influenced toward delusion by films or books that she was reading, she talked about like a positive delusion of experiencing Marilynne Robinson's Home, which I haven't read, but I can imagine what that's like based on everything I've heard and how kind of immersive that would be. And then talking also about a positive experience where she actually is someone who is suffering from PTSD as well as a result of past abuse and rape. And so she found catharsis in that mental illness through reading, and specifically reading crime books. So very violent acts were appealing to her as a way of processing this. So I found that as a tie-in to kind of everything that we do here on BookTube, that we love processing so much of what we experience through books. So that really appealed to me. I do kind of wish she had talked a lot more about her experience in fashion because that came up very briefly and is peppered in a couple times throughout this. But overall, I thought hearing her perspectives on this and the fears that she had about the stigma of the diagnosis, as well as having that double stigma of being Asian American because she has Taiwanese immigrant parents, and she just felt the weight of both of those stigmas together, and she got that across really clearly. So I really enjoyed this collection. Then let's get into the massive pile of print books. books. The first one I have the most to say about. That's Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stephens, and I really love this one. This was a historical, I would say, but it comes from a ghost perspective. So I know quite a few people I saw were sort of disappointed at having gone into this with the expectation of maybe something goofy, spooky and gothic. It's not that. It's not at all that. This is much more about capturing this moment in time where she's experiencing kind of a family holiday. Yeah, so our main POV, Blanca, is this 14-year-old ghost who's been dead for a couple hundred years. So this is set in the 1800s, and she died in the 1400s at this monastery giving birth. And so we do get her story peppered throughout this. So we do actually get kind of two separate but yet connected timelines of her history, how she came to be this ghost in this place. And then we also are seeing a huge part of George Sand's history. And George Sand is the focal point for Blanca, because George Sand is an author who really bucked tradition and was very unusual in her time. She wore pants, how shocking, and she smoked cigars. She was very irreverent and very sexually free. She really didn't care about gender roles for herself. She didn't want to be a traditional wife or mother, but she is a mother, so she's there with her children as well as her lover, Frédéric Chopin, the composer. And so Blanca is immediately enamored. She sees this beautiful man-like woman and finds an allure there. And so the ghost element to this is really about capturing sapphic yearning. There's not a ton of angst to this, but obviously that means it can't be requited. So over the course of this, we see her having understood that sapphic yearning after her death, and describing in beautiful ways the transition of, from her time, men were these very beautiful beings that she was experiencing growing up. At 14, she was kind of just coming into, from childhood into being a teenager and having a lot of urges. So we do see her, and how she fell pregnant really is this big epic story of her finding a passionate romance with someone she thinks she loves, and kind of realizing as it goes on she really barely knows this guy and she's kind of being taken advantage of. And so we see that all play out in real detail. And then after her death, she has seen over a couple hundred years this transition in the ways that men and women dress and behave, and she now sees women as these kind of holy, glorious, beautiful elements in her world. And so when George shows up, she's such an anomaly and a combination of those two things. And because she is a ghost, there is this odd element where Blanca can actually see into people's dreams as well as their futures. So she tries to kind of stay away from those things and just look at their thoughts, so she can see their thoughts about past things that can happen to them or have happened to them. And so I think that was the most connected element in this story. I didn't as much like those two more, like the dreams and future elements as much, but those were much more minor. So for most of this, it's her seeing George's history with her husband, her strained relationships, her passions, her excitements in life, and watching that play out, while also watching this quiet family vacation that is not going the way they expected, basically, on Majorca, where this monastery is. So the family are staying at this chapter house that they thought they were going to get away to and heal up Chopin, because he is struggling with what is consumption at the time. And so they're desperate to kind of get him well and get him really passionate about his music again. And they're not getting what they wanted out of it. They're realizing this place is very drafty and cold, and they were hoping they were coming to this seaside resort, basically, that was going to be warm through the winter to get him by. And so things are going wrong. The village people really don't like them because they're so unusual. And so it's very humorous. It's not outright funny, I wouldn't say, but between the things that are happening that are a comedy of errors. And the character voice for Blanca, she's very quirky and irreverent. I don't know if that's because she's 14, but she's definitely not, for me, a 14-year-old of her time. However, she is a really great character. So I enjoyed that. I don't know if the intent is that over these hundreds of years she's kind of stopped caring, but she is very irreverent, and I just enjoyed that playfulness and it capturing that dynamic of still having some childishness with who she is now and this passion she has for George. So yeah, I really just enjoyed this so much. I could talk about it so much more, but I have a short section that I do want to read. I had a longer section I want to read, but I don't think I can get through it right now. So the short section is the very start of a chapter. So this is just jumping in, talking about her first experience seeing Chopin. Imagine you are about to bite into an apple. Imagine never having bitten an apple before. The fruit at your lips is an unknown thing. It might burst like a tomato, yield like a peach, snap like a carrot. You have no idea about its insides, what color or texture. You have no reason to suspect it will be cloud white, bloodless, foamy, crisp. An apple could be like an orange, segmented, oozy. An apple could be salty and jaw-breaking like a rock. This is what it was like for me the first time I heard Chopin play the piano. Your head is full of apple. Your head is an apple. The flavor of it is indescribable, really, except to say, apple-y. The piece he played took half a minute, start to finish, a sudden offloading of skittish joy, fingers over keys like wings. And I just couldn't hold it in any longer, as though it had burst out before it had been entirely thought through, a little garbled, and then cohering around the thing that at the heart of it all was what was really being said. So you can see there's just rich, glorious, lush prose, but with this playfulness as well throughout. So I think that really captures the tone of this book and why I enjoyed it so much. So really excited to check out Nell Stevens' other work, Bleaker House, which I think is nonfiction, actually. Then I read something very different. I read a children's book, The Magic Misfits, number 4, The Fourth Suit by Neil Patrick Harris, and this is a great series. This is the fourth and final in the series. So I can't really talk too much about the plot here, but in the previous 3 books, so we've switched perspectives across all of the books. We've got our magic misfits there, and they are magician children who have this very closely bonded kind of found family of sorts between themselves doing practical magic. And so in this book, they have been previously facing a single villain who was always kind of coming after them. And every single book had sort of a practical magic element that was used against them to some degree. And so here they're finding out, uncovering how all of those things linked together. So each of the previous stories wrapped up on its own. So they had uncovered what was happening there and why the magic was being used, but now they're finding out there are connections there between each of those things that occurred. And the big bad guy kind of coming after them, they're uncovering who that is and why he's coming after them. So this has been just such a great, heartwarming story. There's a lot of good conversation for kids in these. So we have such a diverse group of kids. So these 2 kids have been adopted by the 2 Mr. Vernons who run the magic shop. Ridley is in a wheelchair, but that's never really a challenge for her throughout this this particular book where we're in her perspective. She's just, living her life. She knows how to get around in her wheelchair. And so I think this has had such great conversation about how their differences are a strength, as well as the connectedness of community and found family throughout here. And Ridley specifically is having a real life challenge in this book with her mom and feeling like her mom is too busy for her. And so that's really addressed specifically at the end. And I loved the way that conversation was handled with that. So this was just a really fun read with some more serious themes handled in a great way. So then I read a romance novel. I read To Be Loved by You by Debbie Burns. This is from the Rescue Me series, and this is probably my favorite romance series. It's set at a dog rescue in my city, so I love the references to actual places in my city, and I love the dog rescue elements. Sometimes they are very difficult, but mostly heartwarming. So this is following Ava and Jeremy, initially they have connections to the shelter and are both kind of looking to increase their involvement there, but they get thrown together when at the beginning the shelter is having a dog washing event as they are bringing in this massive breeder raid where they've brought in 300 dogs from I think a golden doodle breeder. So they're dealing with these really dirty, filthy dogs, and they have to deal with a lot of them very fast. And through some ulterior motives of their friends there, they get paired together. And of course, sparks fly. And you can see Jeremy's adorable dog, Rollo, here is some sort of Bernese mountain dog mix who is always around and always fabulous. But the two wind up making a connection over the fact that Ava is a realtor who is just starting to teach yoga on the side, and she's planning to have classes at the shelter with the dogs. And so she has already set up to do that and invites him because he also runs a group for at-risk youth. And so potentially he's thinking maybe he would like to have yoga classes for them as well. And so as a result, they do end up kind of getting into more connected situations. There's plenty of animal rescue through this. However, there are some darker elements. So this is not just purely light and fluffy. I would say this was on the lighter side, but these always tackle heavier topics. So Jeremy is also in that career and kind of threw himself into this involvement with these at-risk kids because he was kind of a neglected and abused child and struggled with addiction himself. And so he's coming out of a background of alcoholism and addiction. And then Ava, as well, feels a strong affinity once, they have that conversation because she has struggled with eating disorder. And so I like these books specifically because they have really, really great communication. And that definitely happens here. The typical kind of third act dramas are a lot lower key than other romance series for me because of the fact that the characters typically do actually just like talk through things. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I thought it was great. The rescue elements were, even though these people are not directly involved with the rescue, of course they get increasingly caught up and involved in the rescue, and they do have multiple other things beyond the dog washing thing where they're involved in dealing with dogs and cats for other reasons. So yeah, it really just hit all my buttons for romance. And then we have two graphic novels. The first is actually thanks to Criminally. Criminally did a video discussing why you should check out Junji Ito. And I have read Junji Ito before, but only a short graphic novel about, or manga, it's manga, about their cats. So this is an actual horror manga. This is Censor, which is one of the more recent. I think this came out in English in 2021, and the translator, I should tell you who that is Joclyne Allan. So I did wind up really liking this, and I picked it up because Criminally specifically discussed the fact that some of these books are much more psychological and less really gruesome. So there is a little bit of gruesome stuff, but it was not anything too horrible for me. And I had actually flipped through this at the library before I picked it up to make sure there was kind of not a lot of body horror. There is one section with spiders that I think was a little much, where there's like spiders with kind of human organs, is all I'll say. But that was very brief. So overall, this is a story about volcanic hair. Sounds pretty weird, doesn't it? So as a result of volcanoes going off routinely, apparently there are these strands of like black hair. And this one time, 2 years ago, there was a volcanic hair situation. You can see this cat with some little volcanic hairs off of it, where golden hair, and that's the reason for the cover being so gold, golden hair came down, and this one woman somehow survived the eruption and was like buried in golden hair. And they say that this golden hair, anyone it touched or attached to, gained some additional sense powers. And so this woman that was completely covered supposedly has like a massively improved sense, mental senses, and like to the point of clairvoyance. But she disappeared after that. And so now we're following this man who has seen her and found her. And that gets all caught up into a cult, I would say, that is really obsessed with this whole clairvoyance and sensing and using her as a conduit. So they're after her. And I don't want to talk too much about the plot, but that was very compelling. And I think the art was really incredible. I mean, you can tell just from what I showed that this is very like detail-oriented artwork. Lots of black and white, which I'm not usually so into, but this is really just impeccable. And it wound up being the eerie sort of thing I was looking for without being overly gross. There were a couple of gross moments, but overall really, really good, and I'm glad I picked it up. There was one thing that did turn me off. At the very end, it sort of gets into like religious propaganda a bit out of nowhere, and I really didn't understand where that was coming from or what it was trying to say there. So strange, but the whole thing is strange, so I'll go with it. So I'm actually glad I did finally pick up a horror manga from Junji Ito. And the last thing that I read this week was 30 Days of Night, and this is by many people, so I will list those all down below. I think I remember reading this initially and realizing that the writing was pretty clunky, but this time on a reread, the writing was definitely really clunky, but it's fine. I actually really like the story, so I think the writing is a good vehicle for the story and kept pretty minimalist, and the art is so fabulous. So the art is really strange because it's almost always sort of blurred to a degree. It reminds me a lot of Dave McKean. And so it doesn't get as gruesome as it could because this is a vampire novel. This is all about vampires coming to Barrow, Alaska, where sun sets and stays down for 30 days straight. And so the vampires are thinking this is going to be this amazing paradise for them. So as I said, the art kind of reminds me of Dave McKean in that the faces are sort of clear, but then everything else is really sort of blurry. It's all very, very dark. And here's something set in New Orleans. So this has a whole tie-in to New Orleans vampires. And I have never continued on with this series to get into that part. So I really kind of think I might want to check that out. But this was my creepy read for Halloween. And I'm really happy I reread this for it because I did really enjoy it. That is everything I read. So getting into the stuff very, very quickly, getting into the stuff I am currently reading because we will talk about it plenty next week. I started, finally, The Three Musketeers. So that's going along. I'm not sure if I'm loving the beginning. It's kind of like dudes getting into fights, but it's fine. Well, hopefully, it's a very long book. It will get more in depth. The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells, one of my nonfiction November picks. Really enjoying this. Very heavy though. The Queens of Innis Lear. We're gonna make it this week, I think. So I have a little bit more reading to complete the second to last section, and then I will be down to only the final section of this and 100 pages. We're gonna finally finish that chunker. And then I did start another fantasy book. This is I think this is like a alternate history, future Paris with fallen angels. It's really interesting so far, about 50 pages into that one. So that's what I am reading. On audiobook, I did also pick up Little Brother by Ben Westhoff, purely random chance because it was available now on Libby. Really, really enjoying it. So I'm excited to finish that one and talk about it. That is it for books this week. I know it's a lot. I mentioned up front that the week did not go to plan at all. I did not get out and do a ton of fun stuff. So I was struggling with kind of crippling headaches. Like I'm a person who's very used to headaches and even migraines, and this was beyond that. I knew to expect some headaches because I just got some Invisalign and orthodontics in my mouth, and that does cause headaches. So I was having that last week. I got that about a week and a half ago, I think, or a little more than a week ago. So I was struggling with the headaches. They really meant I couldn't go out and do kind of any of my optional plans that I was planning to do just by myself. I wound up having to cancel 2 of my plans that were with other people that I was like really excited about going out because it rained for one of the days I had outside plans, and I was really excited to film that and share that with you. And unfortunately, not good for outside if it's pouring rain. And then the other one of my brackets came out already. So I went through several days and was like kind of starting to feel almost normal, and then the bracket on this side came out, and so I had to wait a couple days to get it back in. So I think that probably contributed to the headache situation, because I basically like got through the initial worst part and then lost all that progress for 3 days, and then got it back in and then had to go through horribleness again. So today is the first day I'm kind of starting to feel normal and not having massive pain, because like the other side was pretty much almost normal at the point when I got the bracket back in, and then had to go through it with the other side of real soreness, like severe soreness with the tops that are being moved by the brackets. So that was kind of a nightmare. And as I said, that meant a lot of canceled plans and a lot of not doing the things I wanted to do, because obviously if you're having terrible headaches, you can't really look at things. So anything I would wanted to do, whether that be watching shows, reading, even like crocheting, just sitting there crocheting is not really possible. I can't do it without looking. So yeah, that was very, very frustrating to my week, but I'm glad I was not working for it, and I did kind of just get to laze around because my teeth were hurting so much. I didn't really want to go out to restaurants or anything until the very end of the week. So yeah, I couldn't even like meet up and have lunch with people. So that was very miserable, but I'm glad I'm feeling sort of normal today. And I did take advantage the day I went to get my bracket done. I kind of had to cancel my whole day because it was basically like in the middle of the day, and had to run up there for like a 15-minute appointment when they could get me in to get it done. I did take advantage of that though and go do early voting, because my state is having no excuse voting for the first time, and that is really exciting, because with the past couple years, because of everything, you could just use, I don't want to be in a massive public gathering as your excuse. So that was available before. But they finally have introduced basically early voting for the 2 weeks prior to the election. So I have gotten in and voted already. Really exciting. I think like 10% of people in the greater metro area in my city have voted at this point, as of I think Friday morning. So we've had a whole extra 2 days at this point. So that's very exciting. So yeah, get out and vote. I think I have some footage to throw in there of me after. And I think that is really it for interesting stuff for my week. I've rambled on about books so much, and I don't really have anything terribly interesting to say about my week. I will include a little footage of some of the stuff I did get out and do that I could share. I'm not one of those people that like records when I'm out with people. I don't like to do that. So I recorded a few things here and there that were kind of like normal to record. So you'll get some good footage. And then for upcoming, I can't remember if I have shared before my pancake recipe, but I think I'm gonna make a video tomorrow for my 2-ingredient pancakes. So I'll do that tomorrow. And then I do have enough fall leaf footage to make you guys a dedicated fall leaf video. So those are just some short, non-bookish videos that I will have coming up. I think that's it for my week for my recommendations. I only have one recommendation, other than the mention of Criminali's video on Junji Ito. I'll link that down below. I will also point you to Shelley Swearingen, the delightful. She shared how to use Bookfinder to find books. And this is about secondhand book buying for the most part. So you can get new books on there as well, but she used it for secondhand. And I thought that was really fascinating. I've never heard of Bookfinder before, and it's basically like an aggregate site to find all the book selling options to buy a specific book, which is of course much more useful for older, used, out of print type stuff. So that was very cool. Really, really well presented. So definitely check out Shelley's video. So that is it for me this week. Hopefully you all had a wonderful past week, and thank you so much for watching. Yes, I'm judging you. Cinnamon has his nice Halloween bandana on, but he's feeling pretty flop. So it's nap time. We've just been to the vet. Everyone's very upset at me about it. It was the worst day to be a cat. Rue. Cinnamon is hard at work inspecting the room. We are going to watch Cabinet of Curiosities. We got the whole rug that time. Are you trying to calm her down? So excited. I got done voting because we have early voting open for 2 weeks before the election now. We didn't previously until this year, so that is really, really cool. I'm glad I don't have to wait in line on election day, so definitely get yourself out and vote. Well, in the lake.